So we have sorted it out, and we will be live today and henceforth. So today we have Mrs. Aparna, who will be talking about prescribing presbyopic correction the scientific way. Aparna is a postgraduate and graduate from Shankara Nethralaya Elite School of Optometry, and she has her interest in clinical optometry. She teaches at Sankara College of Optometry and has interest in visual optics and diseases. Over to you, Aparna.
Thank you so much, sir, for the introduction. And today good afternoon, everyone, and welcome you all for today's session on precise vision after 40 view clinical pulse. Let's go on to the objectives. So today I'll be talking briefly about presbyopia and what are the methods to prescribe for presbyopia, how to decide the tentative addition, and that tentative addition, how to refine it. So after finding out all this addition, so how do you counsel the patient? And there is also a case-based analysis, and at the end, we'll summarize with few guidelines with prescribing linear additions. So let's move on to the very basics of presbyopia. As all of you know, presbyopia is a natural age-related condition. Usually, the amplitude of accommodation decreases from about 15 diopters in early childhood to 1 diopter before the age of 40 years. And we usually say presbyopia is 40 to 45 years of age it starts. When you look at the usual table regarding the Donders, Duans, and Hofstetters have projected the data, you can see that there is a amplitude of accommodation which is decreasing from 15 diopters to 0 before the age of 60, 65. And now when you look at the age category from 35 to 40 or 45, you can see there is a gradual decrease, or it is like the amplitude of accommodation is actually decreasing to even to 3.5 to 5 diopters. So this data is according to the European population. And when we look at the global prevalence of presbyopia, you could see that they have estimated the prevalence of presbyopia globally. It is around 25 percentage in an average. So that is around 1.8 billion people are having presbyopia. And when you look at the near visual impairment, it is around 826 million with no or inadequate correction in presbyopia. So they also postulated like you have the presbyopia. Is it what are the risk factors which this presbyopia can be started little earlier than 40 years? Is it same in all the population that all the people in all over the country? Is it arising in the 40-45? Let's look at the risk factors. So when you look at the risk factors, there are many risk factors for the presbyopia as it is. So like anatomical, and environmental also. So when you look at this data, there are many things which are actually the precursor for the presbyopia. So when you look at these two categories of ethnicity, the short stature and hypermetropia, and the temperature and ultraviolet radiation. So these are the one basically which we usually vary from population to population. So especially when we put this data to our population, obviously there should be a change or decrease in the amplitude of accommodation much earlier. So there is an Indian study which is published very earliest years. Actually, they actually say Donders or Duan statistics usually not applicable to our population. So, so what is the usual age at which clinically in Indian population we see the presbyopic glasses to be prescribed? It is around 37 years. When you look at this table which is projected from the study, you can see that when compared to the previous table projected according to the European data, you can see that approximately from 31 to 40 years, in between that age, drastically the amplitude of accommodation decreases. So because of this reason, you should be aware when you calculate the prevalence of presbyopia in Indian population also. According to the recent study published in 2019, and it was a systemic review, it says that the presbyopia prevalence usually be in Indian population it is around 33%. They have considered the origin of the presbyopia to be the mean years to be 37 years. And also, why? Because of this, so many people are having, or so many members are there in presbyopic age group. So, what is the global burden of productivity loss with presbyopia? So when you look at the age group, so already we discussed the 37 to 40 or 45. That is the usual age where most of the people usually settle down in life. So that is extremely the productive stage of a person's life. So that particular productive stage, usually when a disability comes in, what happens? They have to compromise their work performance, especially when it is near or intermediate task. So if they are not able to perform well, those cases, they will end up in unhappy work hours. Later, it will lead to stress, health issues. Ultimately, it is going to decrease the quality of life and the economic loss to the country. So we have to be very careful when we prescribe to the people who are above 40 years, and individual care should be taken when we prescribe to each of the members who are there above their presbyopic age. And when we look at the global burden, according to this study, you can see that those people who are less than 50 years, the productivity loss is around 0.016 percentage of GDP. And if you account 65 percentage of people who are productive at that till that particular age, you can see the 0.037 percentage of loss in GDP. So this actually says that adequate prescription to presbyopia is very important thing. So how do you go about examining presbyopic patients? So usually any of the examination, usually when you start with, you will have a history. So then followed with visual acuity and refraction, and followed with anterior segment and posterior segment evaluation, and then counseling. So what is so important in the history? Yes, in the presbyopic category, you have to take a detailed history along with, not only the age is important, a detailed history is required in presbyopic age group. And also visual acuity, as usual, whenever you do unaided and with RX is required, and objective subjective refraction, for subjective refraction to be done for distance as well as for near. And anterior segment evaluation and posterior segment evaluation is also very important, like extraocular motility pupil or slit lamp examination IOP and a fundus examination. Very important, because these categories usually tend to give you what could be the reason why the patient's amplitude of accommodation is reducing. Finally, after diagnosing the disease, you have to counsel the patient very well. So we will look into all these categories in today's session. So first we were when we go on to the history. So the basic thing what you have to be very careful when you take history in the presbyopic is what is their work nature and the ergonomics such as illumination, details of the workspace, whether they are getting adequate illumination to their near target or intermediate target, or the near working distance, all those things to be taken care. Complaints and symptoms, as usual, when we do for other diseases, it should be included. And also systemic current treatment habits, hobbies also, because some of the hobbies, you know, that they may require precise vision for that particular distance. So all these categories usually highlight the visual need of the patient. So if you would like to go ahead with you should know the what is the visual need of the patient, that will be obtained from taking a proper history. So what are the common complaints with which the presbyopic patients usually will come up with? So usual, the most common complaint what the patients will give you are like, I'm not able to see at a distance, I have to keep my target little far away, or I have to use a high powered lenses close to my eye so that I can see the target. So and associated with few of them in the earlier stages, they will also complain about their eye strain and headache and all other associated symptoms, like which is there for the eye fatigue. So Next, after taking the proper history and proper complaints, then we are going ahead with visual acuity assessment and refraction. So in visual acuity, always as you do with, there should be a correlation with the near as well as the distance correction. And your objective refraction, that is the retinoscopy, is going to give you proper, that is what is the refractive error of the patient also. So after objective, as usual, we go with the subjective refraction. So what is so different in subjective refraction? It's nothing different. You have to be careful that you are following all the steps of subjective refraction. So I'll just revise the things which has been already been told by my colleague Mr. Divagar in the previous series of refraction. So you can see all those things are listed over here, that fogging, astigmatism, refinement, duochrome, binocular balancing. All these steps are very much required to attain maximum plus and minimum minus the rule of subjective refraction, which is very much important for the next step of near refinement, that is near addition refinement, which is the basic talk of today. So let's go on. So why this near ad is crucial? Yes, to prescribe proper ad, only then the patient will be comfortable when it has been prescribed there. So how do you decide what is the value with which you have to start? So that is actually called as tentative addition. So it is not the actual addition, it is tentatively you are keeping a point where you are starting with. So it's kind of starting point. So what are the common clinical methods? Usually what you do when a patient comes in. So all of us are doing refraction every day. So what usually you do when a person comes with? So most often, most of the members where we have been come across, they use the age appropriate ad. So what is that age appropriate? Should you go with this table or the second one or the third? So always there is a confusion which one to use with or which is your starting point. So that confusion, because what happens here, as I already discussed, the amplitude of accommodation varies in population, and most of the tables which are available, they are actually relating to that same European population. So is it appropriate to apply that particular age appropriate addition to our Indian population? Yes, it is sure that it is taking less time and very easy to start with, but most often, as already mentioned, the population averages varies, and also the individual what is their visual need also varies. So rather than that, do we have an alternate methods? Let's look into what are the alternate techniques with which you can do prescribe or to decide the tentative addition. So to get the near addition, first step is decide the tentative add. Then go ahead with the refining the tentative addition, and then you get the final addition. So what are the techniques that you can do tentative addition? So there are two basic methods, dynamic retinoscopy and amplitude of accommodation. And to refine the tentative add, you have the other methods like near diaphragm, cross cylinder, or NRA PRA technique. So we look into all these things one by one. So these alternate techniques which I was explaining, that like dynamic retinoscopy and the amplitude of accommodation, is like dynamic retinoscopy has already been explained in the previous series of binocular vision and refraction. It is an objective test. And amplitude of accommodation, it is a subjective where you require the responses from the patient. So dynamic retinoscopy, we do usually MEM, that is a monocular estimation method, over the properly corrected distance subjective refraction value. So whatever value you get at the end of monocular estimation method, you subtract plus zero point 0.5, which is considered to be normal value. So that normal lag, that should be reduced, and whatever is left out, that is your tentative addition, and that tentative addition to be refined later. So let's see some examples where you have MEM value of plus 2 diopter, and that from that you can actually reduce plus zero point 0.5, and plus 1.5 is your tentative addition. So let's look into the next category actually. That is here the amplitude of accommodation is considered as the starting point. Here the near point of accommodation value which can be used for calculating the amplitude of accommodation, and also the habitual working distance which the patient require, that is also required to find through this particular method. So what are the formulas usually being used? So early presbyopes or working distance less than or equal to 40 centimeter, usually you can keep 1 by third as a reserve, and the tentative add can be calculated leaving that one third reserve, that is working distance power. L is the working distance power minus two third of the amplitude. So if a patient is above 40 years or depends on the working distance, you can also keep half of the amplitude of accommodation in reserve and calculate the same way. But here to decide on which one, it is just a clue that which formula to be used. Most often we use the second one. If you can use other one also, it is fine. So let's see a few of the examples, like age approximately 50 years, means age is 50 years. Working distance, what the patient requires is 40 centimeter. That means working distance power is 2 point plus 2.5 diopter, and amplitude of accommodation of the patient is plus 2 diopter. So you would take half of that amplitude and the plus 1, and that plus 1 is kept in reserve for the patient's flexibility in vision, and the rest of it can be reduced from the working distance power. You get plus 1.5. So this plus 1.5 is actually the tentative addition of the patient. So let's look at the another example here, where the patient's age is 40 years, working distance remains same, that is 40 centimeter, that is working distance power is plus 2.5, and amplitude of accommodation of the patient is little better because the patient is age is 40 years plus 3. Here I'm using plus 3 divided by 3, that is one third of the amplitude of accommodation, that is plus 1 diopter is your reserve, and two-third of it actually being reduced from the working distance power. So in this case, what is the tentative at which you have to start your near subjective refraction, that is plus zero point 0.5. So let's go on to the next one. So now you have got, either by using dynamic retinoscopy or by using your amplitude of accommodation technique, you have got your final add, means sorry, tentative addition. So that tentative addition, it's not the exact final add. Now how do you get into the final add? What are the techniques to refine your tentative addition? So here you have the methods. Three methods are there, that is near diaphragm, near JCC, or toss cylinder, or balancing NRA PRA. So these are the three techniques which are used for refining the tentative addition. So what is the near diaphragm? The diaphragm principle, as everybody know, it is based on the chromatic aberration, and it is the same thing which is used at the habitual working distance of the patient. So here your tentative addition along with your distance correction, you have the tentative addition is also in place. And now the response, if your tentative addition what you have kept is optimum, then what is the response which will patient will be giving? Patient will give both red and green are equal, equally seen. So you can also check the range of vision by just moving away, that is near diaphragm to be taken slightly back. The patient will say red clear. If you are moving more further nearer, then the green will be much better. So here you can see, if the patient says green is better, the ray diagram will be looking like this. And here in this case, that means you have to increase the add plus 0.25. So again, in the second picture, you can see that the rays are focusing onto with the red on the retina. So patient will say red is better. In this case, you have to reduce the addition. That means you that your tentative add what you have kept is it's over, means or more. So those cases you have to reduce it. So most often we go with not to give higher addition. So most often even a green better also can be accepted. So next step in refining tentative addition is near JCC. So everybody knows what is JCC. It is a cross cylinder which is of equal power kept 90 degrees. So here we are using plus or minus 0.25 JCC, where you should know where is the position of your axis and where is the power acting. So it has been represented in the picture there. And the target what you give here is a cross target which is kept at the habitual working distance, and how to place the cylinder. So it's not unlike the distance. Usually what you do will be, you will be flipping the JCC. That is not done over here. Here what you do is you keep the minor cylinder axis perpendicular, that is 90, as shown in the picture. Only at that position you will ask the patient for different responses. So what are the responses? Usually you will get it in the near JCC technique. So one thing, if first response is, if your tentative addition what you had kept is optimal, those cases when you keep the JCC over to that your JCC your tentative addition, you will get a response back because you are creating astigmatism here. So 0.25, the horizontal line have moved front, and plus 0.25 means 0.25 it has gone beyond, minus 0.25 has gone beyond. So the circle of least confusion will still be there at the center of retina, means at the retina. So the here patient is going to give both lines are clear. That means your tentative add what you had kept is optimal. And also the second response, where you can see that your cross will be in front if your tentative addition is more. Then those cases, if you keep cylinder JCC in front of the tentative addition, those cases, what happens is your circle of least confusion will be that point only, but the two focal lines have separated. Which is the focal line which is next to the retina? That is the vertical line. Patient will give you vertical line is clearer. So in this case, you can decrease the tentative addition. And another one is your third response, where your tentative addition what you have kept is less than actual. In those cases, if you keep the JCC over there, you can actually see that the lines are splitted when you keep the JCC, and the horizontal line is nearer to the retina. Patient will give you response as horizontal is clear, and in this case you have to increase the tentative addition. So this is how you have to interpret the results in near JCC. The third method in refining technique is NRA-PRA method, where the over the tentative addition, you have to perform NRA, that is negative relative accommodation, and PRA, that is positive relative accommodation. And now add these values and check for linear range of clear vision. Sorry. So check for linear range of clear vision. So what is this linear range of clear vision? So this is actually how much area the patient can, or how much, that is from near point to far point, what is the clear area which with the addition patient can see clearly. So how do you adjust this? The working distance of the patient should fall exactly at the center of the linear reach. That what it actually means is, you can look at the picture here where the person is reading a book, and that is his habitual working distance. And now when you, the near point of the patient, like when you move, when the person moves the target closer to him, the nearest point till which he can see with the addition in place, and farthest, so that nearest point is around 30 centimeter, and the farthest point when he moves little farther, that point is at 60 centimeter. That means in between 30 centimeter and 60 centimeter, this patient has a clear vision with his bifocals. So in that case, if your addition is perfect, then the addition, that is the midpoint, will be the working distance of the patient. So this is what the NRA-PRA is doing here. And then, for example, there is an amplitude of accommodation. So this first step is based on the amplitude of accommodation, the tentative add is calculated. You can see here the amplitude of accommodation is +3 and habitual working distance is 40 centimeter, and the working distance converted to diopter you will get plus 2.5, and accommodation which is kept here, half of the amplitude of accommodation in reserve is being used, and +3, half of that will be plus 1.5, and the tentative addition according to the formula you will get it +1. Now what you do to find this, here we are using NRA-PRA technique. So the NRA-PRA and NRA of the patient will be +1 and PRA is minus zero point 0.5. So the sum of it you get plus zero point 0.5, and refine how much you have to refine here, take the half of it, you get plus 0.25. And what is your final add? To your tentative addition, that is the +1 which is there, add the refinement, that is plus 0.25, you get plus 1.25, which will be at the mid of the clear vision range which is there. So I hope it is clear. And now we will just summarize what we have seen in the near addition. So in near addition, what first step what you do is deciding tentative addition. So there we have found there are two techniques. Either you can do MEM or an amplitude of accommodation method. There, next, after finding the tentative addition, you can refine your tentative addition where you have three steps. Those are MEM and your near diochrome, sorry, not near diochrome, and JCC, and your NRA-PRA. So, and also finally at the end, after refining your tentative addition, it is important that you check the area where the patient is, or the range at which patient can see, that is the closest and the farthest, and you should make sure that your final add what you have refined, that is actually at the midway between the closest and the farthest near vision. Now after doing all this subjective, near subjective refraction, the next step is you have to evaluate all other tests as already been told. You have to check for extraocular muscle, motility, pupil, all these things along with the other anterior segment examination and posterior segment examination. Now, next is how to manage. Now you have the presbyopic correction. Now you have the other techniques in hand. Now, or the addition is being calculated properly. So how and what next? So it will be like you have various researches going on, various things are going on around this management of presbyopia, where the conventional mode of treatment usually be bifocal or the progressive contact lenses, lasers, or the IOLs, that accommodating IOLs, all those things. So it depends on patient's choice. You can move ahead with the management. Next important topic which comes in over here is the counseling, or the what instructions to be given to the patient. So the main thing which comes is the demonstration and counseling of range of near vision. So what are the range of near vision, or how much area? So you have to counsel the patient. This is the area where you are able to see clearly, beyond which it will not be clear. So are you comfortable with this particular range, and your basic working distance lies within at the center of this clear vision range. So this instruction to be given clearly to the patient, and you have to explain the various management options based on the visual need and the economic stability. Patient will go in for which of the management, but you have to talk about the advantages, disadvantages of most of them. And constant wear or reading only, or if the patient is going for glasses, then you have to counsel them for a constant wear, or is it reading only, what will happen if they use this one for distance and all those things. Occupation and hobby specific glasses to be counseled very much, like you can only use these glasses only for this particular purpose, for the rest of it probably you have to find another different glasses. So all this counseling to be given to the patient, and first time wearers explain the disadvantage, advantage of each management option. This is very important because people are not aware of this all management. So the counseling is very important when it comes to the presbyopic patient. So let's see. So these are the examination techniques what we usually follow in a presbyopia. So now let's look into one of the case. So where the patient had come to the clinic, who is 46-year-old male, and occupation is clerk at government office. So chief complaints of the patient were like I'm not comfortable with the new glasses which were bought elsewhere. He is using that for only for 2 weeks, and complained of difficulty in reading, writing for a long period of time. All those things were the main complaint patient was kept telling. And history of wearing bifocals were for previous 4 years, and history of wearing this present means wearing glasses is from 10 years, and history and other family history was nothing significant. So when you look into, as I mentioned earlier, occupation related history, the nature of work like reading, writing was approximately between the 40 to 50 what the patient told. Illumination, the patient told that adequate illumination was there, room illumination was there on the target. And previous glass prescription, that is the new one which with which he had the complaints, that is around distance, right eye 0.75 plus 0.75, left eye plus 1 diopter, and the addition was plus 1.75. And vision, unaided vision was 612 with N10, and left eye was 618 plus N10 parts, and at the working distance of 45 to 50. So vision with RX, that is the new RX with which he had the problem, 66 and 6 was there, but the you can see that when you look at what are the problems here, one is your near vision was approximately 2.5 to 2.75, and also you can see the range at which the patient read the target. So these are the things which you keep in mind. We'll analyze at the later. So retinoscopy was performed. Both eyes were found to be plus 1.25. Subjective acceptance, patient accepted plus 1 diopter, and it was 6 vision. Under the technique was done under fogging. Proper fogging was done, and duochrome was balanced, and binocular balancing were done. And add calculation, usually because the patient had issues, MEM was done, and plus 1.75 diopter was found to be the MEM value for the patient. And according to the previous discussion, you know how to calculate the tentative addition. So plus 1.25 is the value with which you can start with, or you had the NPA of the patient also, where the NPA of right eye, left eye, or the binocular was showing as like 40 centimeter approximately, and amplitude of accommodation approximately calculated to the plus 2.5. So working distance calculated, or the patient wanted us in between the 40 to 45 centimeter, approximately it was also plus 2.5. Now, one third of the value was taken to in the reserve, that is approximately 1 diopter, and tentative addition was calculated, reducing the rest of it, that is 1.5, from the working distance power, you get plus 1 diopters. And NRA was done over the tentative add, and you get NRA value of plus 1.25 and PRA of minus 0.75. So the refinement required here is you have to take the sum of it, and that is sum and then divided by 2, you get plus 0.25. Final addition is plus 1.25. So what is the final RX of the patient? So it is this way: right eye and both left eye, both patient plus 1 diopter, and the addition given was plus 1.25 and 6, and patient was comfortable in between the range 35 to 50 centimeter. Patient said it is comfortable and gave continuous text reading because the patient already had some issues. So we have to give whether patient is okay with this particular distance. So gave a continuous text reading for 15 minutes. So again, after this, in between the consultation on inquiry, came to know that the bifocal RX, which the patient was using like for the 4 years previously, it was this way. Both eyes were only 0.5 and addition was plus 1, and which he had used it for 40 years without any complaints. And here you can see the near vision, total near vision for the his target was plus 1.5, and rest of the other examinations also were done, that is slit lamp examination, extraocular motility, IOP, and fundus. Everything was done, everything seems to be normal, and patient was advised new glasses and returned to clinic whenever there is like any emergency, and counseling and demonstration given with the new glasses also. So at a glance, what were the issues in the case? So PGP in the first, where with which he had the issues, approximately was 2.5 to 2.75, and working distance with the PGP was too close, that is 37 centimeter. And first time bifocal where only near vision was only plus 1.5, with which patient was very comfortable for the 4 years, and final RX found to be plus 2.25. Now, when we just highlight the issue, things here, distant, you can see that in the previous one, plus 0.75 was there in the right eye distance, which when you did proper fogging, it is actually came to plus 1, that is maximum plus was not achieved, that was one of the issues. And sudden jumping add power from plus 1 to 1.75, and working distance was too close. When we dealt with all these issues, the patient was comfortable later. So what are the things when we come on to the clinically? So to summarize all these things, the do's, like what are the clinical perspective, what all things you have to look in when you prescribe for a presbyopia are, just to summarize today's class, like you have to mainly focus on patient's occupation. What is the patient's occupation, which will actually give a clue to what is the visual need of the patient. On working distance, yes, what is the working distance with which patient is mostly working on, and where actually he needs an addition glasses. Another one is lighting, to that whether adequate lighting is there onto, because you know that accommodation matters with the lighting also. And another important thing which you have to look in are like the stature of the patient. Yes, obviously, why it is so? You can see that a person who is having a long hands or a short hands, obviously their working distance is going to be smaller. So this is also very important when you look clinically. And also another one, if the person is a first time wearer, so if the patient is first time wearer, you have to be very careful when you advise. So advise to the patient that all this what are the advantages, otherwise patient will come back, they are not aware of, they are only aware of the single vision glasses. And if they are going for bifocals progressive, they are not aware of the jump effect or the side blurring, all those things. So you have to be very careful, you have to be very careful when you prescribe the ad. You should not jump and give the high additions in these cases. And also, if the patient is already a spectacle wearer, you have to know what is the addition power. And also, all these perspectives you should actually look in when the patient, when you are about to start your refraction and finding out the ad itself. So while prescribing ad, you have to be very accurate in the retinoscopy, which will actually project what is the refractive status of the patient, and also perform a distant subjective refraction properly to attain maximum plus and minimum minus. And then adequate tentative addition and refinement technique to be done, which will actually give you that. And also with that final addition, you have to demonstrate the range of clear vision, and you have to record that and give adaptation time if required, and proper counseling also. And then all together you can come to the conclusion that diagnosis also. And don't, or be cautious when you do these things, that is, don't assume age appropriate correction is same for all, and unequal ads, don't prescribe it unnecessarily. Always check if the additions are different, and increase or decrease in addition in large step. That is also to be careful clinically. So all these things to be kept in mind when you prescribe for presbyopia. So these are my references, and I would like to thank all members of Shankara Academy of Vision, and Professor Aditya Goyal, our principal and moderator of the session, and fellow faculty members at Bangalore and Ludhiana, and the audience for their patient listening, and my friends and other colleagues. Thank you very much, and thank you. Stay safe. I'm open for questions now.
Thank you, Aparna, for the great talk.
Thank you, sir.
Currently, we don't have very many questions for you. There's a question from Mr. Divakar,
Yes,
and he has complimented you for your excellent talk.
thank you, sir.
His question is, how do we prescribe near addition in presbyopic patients with anisocoria?
Okay. Okay, yeah, it's a very good question, sir. In Korea, usually what we say, because when accommodation is there, uh, accommodation and convergence and near vision, all these things actually, meiosis also works together as a triad. So what happens is when there is anisocoria, obviously patient might have some kind of diplopia kind of thing also. So what happens is when you do, you can also check with the ad whether any abnormalities or whether patient is having any diplopia kind of or some quality is affected. Those cases you can try to match or try to bring down the addition or whatever, if like if they are looking at near, and you can use the near Worthford or sorry near Worthford and see whether it is balanced or some issues are there with. So this is what I know. Sir, you would like to add any points, sir? Aditya, sir?
No, that's fine.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Acha, Aparna, there's a question from Mrs. Devakani Suresh, who is a very regular listener on our channel,
Yeah, yes, sir.
and she has
Thank,
complimented you on your great presentation.
thank you.
She has a very interesting question,
Yes, sir.
and I agree with her. She's asking, how do you explain presbyopia to the first-time wearer in layman's terms? Because age is something which we don't like to be reminded of. I don't want to be called an old person, and
Yes.
presbyopia means old age sight. So how do you explain it to the patient?
Okay, so from my experience, what I would suggest is like when I counsel the patient, what I do, yeah, I'll say is even we can actually like compare ourselves, then patient will feel better. So I can say it's not you or me, anyone who is actually anybody who is there. You can actually cross. So in our population, as I mentioned, you can actually think of a 37 years old. So you or me, anybody, when you actually grow, you can put it in a positive way probably, like when you actually grow in your life, like that time there is a slight deterioration changes or something happening inside the eye, so which is actually causing this particular thing. This is nothing abnormal, this is perfectly normal, which can happen to anyone who's big or small, so nothing to worry about it and you can do well. So you will counsel other management options also along with that.
Aparna, there's a question from Ms. Bhavya.
Yes,
She
yes,
wants
sir.
to know the appropriate method to perform NPA in presbyopic age group.
Yeah, definitely it will be like either a dynamic retinoscopy or means okay, to know amplitude of accommodation, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. So for
Near point
amplitude,
of accommodation.
yeah, near point of accommodation, uh, you can actually do it from like your push-up method for amplitude of accommodation to find it, because and patient may not be seeing that target if the patient is of nearer to the absolute presbyopic age. Those cases probably you can keep the plus one addition or whatever addition, tentative addition or something you have, you can actually keep that addition there, or if the previous addition is there you can keep that, then do the push-up test, and whatever near addition near point of accommodation you have got along with the plus one, that sorry I'm just using plus one, that as you have kept it, now what you do is with that near working distance near point conversion, you reduce that add power, you will get amplitude of accommodation. Am I hope I cleared the doubt, or should I explain
Yeah, I
again?
think, Aparna, if you can give an example, that will make it even clearer.
Okay, so suppose I can give you like I'm using a plus one addition because I got it from the previous prescription. So there is a plus one addition which is kept over the patient's distance correction. Now what I do is I will actually bring same monocular or monocular also binocular also you can do it, and bring the target closer to the patient with the plus one addition in place, and you are getting a, for easier calculation I'll keep 40 centimeter you have got it. So 40 centimeter means it will be 2.5. So from that 2.5, so you have got that 2.5 with addition in place. So what you do is 2.5 minus 1 plus 1.5 would be the amplitude of accommodation of the patient.
Yeah. There's another question from Mrs. Devakani.
Yes, sir.
She says found latent hyperopia at the age of 38 or 39 years,
Yes.
confirmed with cycloplegic refraction, asymptomatic for distance, but struggles for near. How do you go about treating him?
Okay, latent hypermetropia, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so patient is not using glasses, I would assume, or it is prominent at
Let's
the age of.
assume that he is not using glasses.
Okay, so there is a latent hyper. Okay, that it is. Thank you, ma'am, for the question. And if that latent hypermetropia and patient has not used that glasses, then those cases probably you can try pushing the patient maximum plus in your distance correction itself, and try getting into like try like say suppose +1 latent hypermetropia is there, so those cases you can try pushing maximum of that power based on the cycloplegic refraction, and with that value if the patient is okay doing the near vision, because patient was not using the glasses previously, and he or she is having a +1 diopter of latent, so you can push maximum if the patient accepts +1 in the post cycloplegic technique subjective refraction, then you can prescribe that if the patient is comfortable. Otherwise you can consider, because if the patient is in Indian population, comes into the Indian population, then obviously as I told in Indian you can actually start the presbyopia little earlier also, even 38 is considered to be presbyope. So that case, probably if patient is still not clear with the maximum addition, maximum distance vision you can give, those cases you can add uh, give addition to the patient using any of the techniques explained. I hope I answered the question, sir.
Yeah. There's a question from Mr. Himanshu Sapra.
Yes.
He wants to know if there's any specific reason why we
Yes.
avoid giving unequal ads.
Because obviously, yes, thank you for the question. And if you actually give unequal ads, obviously the not the 0.25 or zero point 0.5, but unequal ads, if you give, patient will have difficulty focusing onto the near target, and patient will like the little magnification effect also will be added on to that. So I would, so that cases, especially if not very specific, you should not, you will have to match the addition which is given on both eyes. Sir, any points to add on this, sir?
It actually depends upon the accommodative status of the eye and if he's a pseudophakic or aphakic or whatever. And we have to look at it from patient to patient perspective. So you cannot have one single rule for everyone. So it depends upon the requirements and everything. And like what you said, yeah, we have to look at it. There's another question which he has asked.
Yes, sir.
While giving unequal ads, what points do you need to remember?
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. And when you prescribe, you have to look at the status of, as sir was mentioning previously, you have to look at what is the status of accommodation, or is it really necessary to prescribe this unequal ad, or try pushing the maximum plus power to the distance correction, so that you can balance the addition. All these things like, and also look at whether patient's vision is okay. Like you have to see whether a patient is getting any quality, like any diplopia kind, or any disturbances, or some ghost images kind of anything which is affecting the magnification also, and the quality of vision at the near. So all these things should be considered when you actually prescribe when you go for an unequal ad for the patient.
Aparna, Mr. Dhanaraju wants to know, first of all, he's complimented on a great presentation.
Thank you.
And just one second. Yeah. What about the intermediate correction in these or any other cases that you see? How do you take care of them?
Intermediate distances actually, slight difference is only what is that, because all the techniques whatever I explained, I have told that the habitual working distance of the patient, so there it could be a near distance or an intermediate distance. So obviously the intermediate add power what you give will be less than the near addition. So those cases what happens is, you can do the test, whichever technique you can use is, you can actually do it at that intermediate distance if it is like 50 to 60. So because even it can go to the 100 also, 1 meter distance also. But if it is nearer to 50-60, then you can actually do perform the test at that particular distance and confirm whether your power is correct. Or if it is little longer, or then you can actually reduce by 0.5 diopter for the intermediate correction also.
Mhm. Ms. Ashwini wants to know if there's a 37-year-old patient who's already using a near ad. How
Okay.
do you manage such cases in clinic?
Okay, so a patient has been already prescribed with the addition.
Yep.
Yes, sir. So you can actually confirm as like, because this 38, 37, when it comes to our population, actually it is much crucial age. So that means usually, as I told previously, that range of accommodation or the amplitude of accommodation for our population drops down drastically from the 30 or above years. So you can also assume, you can do the amplitude of accommodation test and find out whether the amplitude of accommodation of the patient, and as already told, the distance should be perfectly correct. So all these things, if you just do it and try checking whether patient is really presbyope, then probably if patient doesn't have any problems with that classes, then you can go ahead saying that, because nothing wrong in that, because patient is into the presbyopic age. Confirm that with your amplitude of accommodation. If not, patient is having trouble with the glasses and patient is, you can push plus to the distance and very well do a proper refraction with the fogging and all other things, then uh, probably you have to counsel the patient that there is a different change in that glass power. Probably you may require in a 1 or 2 years later also. So that need to be confirmed doing all the tests which I have explained it previously, especially the amplitude of accommodation to be checked, or checked for any other history details or any other usage of drug or any other systemic diseases which are coming earlier. All these risk factors also you can put in together to find out what is the cause for this person to develop presbyopia in a little earlier age, and also take a good history that how long patient has been prescribed this, which also will give you or other status of other binocular vision status, all these things to be put together and do a proper evaluation for the patient. I hope I answered your question, Ashwini.
Yes, thank you, Aparna. There's a question from Ms. Astha Parekh.
Yes.
She wants to know how you should prescribe in case a subject has pseudophakia in one eye in an adult and in a younger individual.
Okay. So
So there are
thank
two
you.
parts to the question.
Yes, sir.
Patient is pseudophakic
Okay,
in
sir.
one eye,
Yes, sir.
and one patient is young and the other patient is adult. So how
Okay.
do you handle them?
Okay. So yes, very good question, Asha. Thank you for the question. And here, I'll just take the pseudophakic case first. So suppose you are prescribing, one eye is already pseudophakic. Those cases, most oftenly what happens when they actually put in, if suppose I'm just taking an example where the IOL is being put in, and when you actually calculate the IOL power, usually in such cases, when the patient is going only for one eye surgery, most often we aim for a myopic correction. Another one, in that case, the actually the addition what you can give will be slightly lesser. And compare the other eye. So when you give the addition, try to match this addition to the other eye also, and give the lesser add to the this eye where you have done the cataract surgery, that is pseudophakic eye. So try to match that. As I already told, you need to do other binocular vision things also, like whether the fusion and quality of vision is not getting affected. Like that, you have to match the addition which is there on the both eyes. So the other question was the patient is young, right? Sir?
Yeah.
So the same thing when it happens to the young patient, probably what you can do is like the other eye, assume it is normal, and pseudophakic eye, again it depends on the patient visual need of the patient. So take a proper history to the patient and understand what is the visual need and what is he or she is doing, whether the near addition is very much required for that, or a precise, I could say the precise vision is required, or just that it is okay. Because if other eye is perfectly normal and this eye, you can actually prescribe the near vision glasses with a low ad depends on the power of the other eye also, and try to give to match the other eye, and ask the patient to use only if they require precise vision for the near. Otherwise, he can very well go. Sir, any other point to be added or
No.
anything? Thank you, sir.
There's a question from Ms. Trupti Shah.
Yes, sir.
She says that in Mumbai, room dimensions are quite small. If we are prescribing bifocal to these patients, will it make a difference to the patient?
Sir, can you explain the question once again, sir?
Even I'm not able to understand this. I don't understand how the room dimensions come over here. I can read it out again,
Yes, sir.
or I can request her to give more details so that we can answer this later.
Yes, sir. Okay,
Trupti,
sir.
is it possible for you to give a proper description of what you want to know? It will be helpful if you can write it down. So we will take your question a bit later. Asha, there's a question from Ms. Devi Uday Kumar.
Yes, sir.
She wants to know, are bifocals still given as first option for the first time presbyopia?
In my opinion, I think you can give, because when we actually give options to the patient, we have to look at that not all members in our population, especially in a developing country like India, most often people are not all people who are in that presbyopic age, everybody are into the work of near or intermediate. So when you consider patients' occupations, yes, especially as a computer user or anything, you would directly go into the other options of progressive addition lenses. But definitely, if not, if most often we come through like females, as I told, so females, especially all the Indian population, usually the stature or the working distance of the patient will be much closer working distance. And if mostly the females are usually into females, most often come into very fastly into this category. And when we take the population where slightly female ratio is more, then we can actually, if the patient's working distance is very close and those patients will not wear the glasses for all time, so those patients still bifocals can be an option also. So you can still give bifocal, though not all patients require the intermediate addition. So depends on the patient's visual need, you can give the options.
Yeah, one more thing is it's not developing countries alone. Even in US, I have a number of friends, even optometrists, they wear bifocals and they do not like to go in for progressives. So it's not necessary that everyone should be wearing progressive. And even a good friend of mine, a number of my friends in India, also optometrists, they are not able to get used to a progressive, including me. So we do wear bifocals. Nothing wrong at all.
Yeah, even I agree with sir.
Acha, Aparna, there's a question from Ms. Pratiksha Hegde.
Yes, sir.
She wants to know, is there any method where we can confirm the age of the patient in case of presbyopia through questions where he or she is not really revealing it correctly?
Very good question. If but to be know, as I told, don't assume age. We don't require age at all. We can still find out the amplitude of accommodation through the, I mean, and then based on that you can give the prescription and also make a good observation. But now I don't know whether good observation also will give you a correct thing. But go with the amplitude of accommodation. That is my answer, sir. Anything to be added on? Very good question, but I think
Absolutely, because age is not the criteria for prescribing an addition. Like what you said, amplitude is required and not the age. But then for some other reason, if you want to know the age, then you can find out from the addition of the bifocal or progressive. Ms. Shefali Pandey wants to know, how about push away method for NPA? Will it be the same as push up method?
I would suggest, because we are considering the presbyopes. Uh, okay, I think taking it because especially when sir was mentioned, Divakar sir was mentioning previously in his talks, like you can actually where the kids usually in younger age groups, when it is very much useful, this pull away method is very much, because where the kids doesn't know what is the blur, or what when it becomes blur, they are not very much clear. So to get a proper response, probably you can use in younger age groups, but in presbyop, I feel it is push-up is only best method. Sir, anything to add on, sir?
No, I think you're right. We generally prefer push-up test for these kind of things. But then push away, yeah, you can try it out. Nothing wrong with that. But push-up is the standard method which is used in India at least. Ms. Pratiksha wants to know, I think this question has already been answered, but still I'll read it out for you. In which conditions do we give unequal ads?
So unequal ads usually, like as already mentioned in few of the previous cases, like anisometropia, and also one eye is being already surgery is being done, or some kind of anisocoria as I was mentioning. So such kind of situations usually you can actually usually it will come up, or any abnormalities like amplitude of accommodation, like any palsies has occurred to only to one eye or anything that sort, probably I think unequal ads will come in there. You have to try to match with the other.
Ms. Devi Uday Kumar has rephrased her question.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to recommend progressive or bifocals for the first time wearers?
um, that again depends on the visual need. What is, as I already mentioned, the occupation, you can give both the options to the patient, but still if the patient is actually like really doesn't want, or he doesn't have much of intermediate distance to work on, then I think definitely bifocal in that case you can push it more. It's not that matter that you have to go ahead with the progressive for all cases. It again depends on what is the patient. So for this, actually, a proper history to be taken. What is exactly patient's visual need?
And I would also recommend that you ask this question tomorrow to our speaker, Mr. Ajay Shinde, who will be talking on dispensing. So he may give you a more clearer perspective because he'll be talking on dispensing.
Yes, definitely, sir. True.
Aparna, there's a question from Mr. Navneet Sharma. He
Yes,
has congratulated you on an excellent presentation.
thank you, sir.
And his question is there a specific method to prescribe near ad to a person with high or short stature? A
There
tall
is
or a
no,
short person?
okay, there is no specific method. What you can do is because only thing you have to remember when the person's stature, looking at the stature, most often a person who is short or small, they definitely may not be keeping the target very far and then reading. So definitely what he will be keeping it very closer. So it's a matter of working distance actually. So you can actually recalculate what is the what is the distance habitually the patient really required to read in comfortable position, that need to be found out accurately rather than taking 40 centimeter for everybody. So same
Uh,
case with the tall person also.
yeah.
Sorry, sir.
So in short, for a short person, you give a slightly higher ad, and for a tall person, you give slightly lower ad.
Yes, sir. There is no specific method. Yeah,
Yeah.
it will end up in that way.
Mr. Prabhu Devendran wants to know, in case of childhood anisometropia, how will the decline of amplitude of accommodation be with respect to age?
Okay. I think like childhood cases like childhood anisometropia, sir.
Yep.
Okay. So those cases depends on like the power and whether the patient is into amblyopic, how the stimulation is happening to that eye. Probably the amplitude of accommodation may vary in the eye which is being having the amblyopic. So we need to know that complete status of the eye. Only then I think I can comment on this. Uh, sir, any opinion from your side, sir?
No, I think the amplitude of accommodation is going to change the same way. But it actually depends if he was corrected at that time or not corrected at that time. Because if it is not corrected, then emetropization starts taking place, and there's a slightly different way in which. But then, if you look at the physiological decline, it is going to be similar.
Yes.
So he's just explained it in a slightly different way, where he says, say, for example, two patients with the same age of around 45, but one patient with an isometropia at the age of 10 years, how will the decline of amplitude be over a period of time? Will it be the same?
I think yes, I agree with you, sir, that physiology is the same what is happening irrespective of what is the defect which is there, whether, and also add on to whether patient has any other abnormalities in that eye also. I
Yep.
agree.
Upon Miss Lakshmi Sendil, I think this question has already been answered, but then all the same, I'll put it across.
Okay, sir.
How to calculate intermediate power for intermediate distance power?
Okay, as explained previously, I'll just explain it for you, sir. And it is like intermediate distance. There, as there is no specific method, you calculate what is the intermediate distance which the patient require for his visual need, and that particular distance. If it is very close, probably you can do the same techniques what you are using for your near as it is, or you can actually, so usually the intermediate power will be slightly less than your near addition. It will be like plus 0.5 to 0.75 less than what is your near addition. And usually what happens is as the age increases, that near clear vision, and there is no overlap between the near clear vision and the distant clear vision. That age definitely, probably if they are going for an intermediate correction, then most often it is between the 0.5 to 0.75 range. It means
Thank you,
less than
Aparna.
the near addition. Sorry, sir.
Thank you. Aparna, Mr. Vijay Verma has complimented you on a great presentation.
Thank you, sir.
He wants to know if an aphakic person can be considered as presbyope.
In my opinion, usually no, because means presbyopia, as the definition wise, we actually talk in terms of amplitude of accommodation. So this classification, aphakia, is a separate entity. Usually, you cannot put it that person is having presbyopia. Is it right,
Yeah,
sir?
yeah, totally agree with you. Presbyopia is physiological. So that's a physiological change. Aphakia cannot be considered presbyopia.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Soumya Papachan has complimented you again on a good presentation.
Thank you.
She wants to know, could you please explain what is the change in near acuity and corrected addition values while using an illuminated near vision chart when compared to traditional near vision chart? I think traditional, what she means is the book versus
Okay.
the illuminated near vision charts. Is there a difference?
Definitely, I think it will be, there will be a difference because the illuminated chart, obviously, that how much is the brightness and all those things, if that can be that all those glare effect or anything because of the illumination can affect the accommodation values. I think probably
No, she's
the
talking of near acuity.
near acuity.
Mhm.
I think there is a difference, but I am not very clear how the difference will be, as I'm not very. I didn't think on that. Probably
Yeah.
but I think there will be a difference.
Yeah, actually, it all depends upon how much of illumination you're providing for the booklet also. So if you're providing adequate illumination for the booklet, then it may not be that much of a difference. But then if you're seeing it in very minimal illumination versus an illuminated near vision drum, then yes, it will make a lot of difference. So it depends on the illumination that you're providing and from where it is coming. So you can have on the opposite side or from behind the shoulder. So ideally speaking, like in any examination room, we have light coming from behind the shoulder when you're making the person read. So that should be required. If that is so, then it will not make too much of difference. Do you have anything to add to that, Aparna?
No, I think I definitely agree with you, sir. Because I know that there will be difference if the illumination brightness is actually changed. Then definitely there will be difference. Otherwise, I agree with you, sir.
The last question that I have here is from Mr. Himanshu Sapra.
Yes.
If a computer worker and patient is computer worker and he is not comfortable with the progressive addition lenses and the age is 50 years, how do we manage this kind of a patient?
Okay, so he's not comfortable. So I would like to know further history regarding. So 50 years the patient had actually told. So probably whether the patient is a new progressive addition glasses wearing the glasses recently, or is it because of some other issue suddenly he has a problem with the progressive addition. Obviously, if the patient was using bifocals previously and progressive addition depends on the power because the patient is of 50 years, then I think the power would be slightly higher. So depends on that patient is having. So little adaptation time I think can be given for this patient. And any other, if it is a new wearer, probably what is the correction which was given previously, whether it is the presbyopic or means sorry bifocals or the progressive addition glasses, or is it a shift from that to here, that all this history are actually required to refine my answer, I guess.
A lot of ifs and buts are there in that question. So it actually depends upon the real case. Like what you said, it totally depends if he was a first time wearer or a number of questions arise. Anyway, okay, there's one more question from Mr. Dhanaraju. What about occupational bifocals? Example like librarian and electrician need correction above the eye level most of
Yes,
the time.
yes, definitely. So I think I have not come across these patients. Like actually, when you prescribe for that, definitely the occupational bifocals where you it will be reversed than the distance, and the intermediate distance will be prescribed over to. So I think based on that particular distance, what actually the person require, based on that you can prescribe that. And anything to be added on, sir? I've not come across or I have not prescribed to such cases.
Yeah, I have done that in my life where, let us say, a person who requires a near vision at the superior part. So you give a bifocal in the superior part of the spectacle, and that is only for the time when he's looking at the near thing through the superior part of the spectacle. So you do prescribe depending upon the occupation that the patient is into. So you could give a bifocal, you could give a D bifocal, you could give an executive bifocal, and it has to be perfectly fitted so that the patient is able to work perfectly in that particular posture. So especially for people who are like electricians you mentioned, they have to work on the ceiling for that matter. So they will be provided bifocals in different areas of the spectacle. Aparna, Mr. Himanshu Sapra has come back on that 50-year-old patient computer worker,
Okay.
and he says he's a previous bifocal wearer. So it does. We assume that he is a new progressive wearer.
Okay, so previous bifocal wearer, I think definitely, sir, he requires an adaptation time or that a little more time, or definitely we have to probably look in for whether that near addition or what type of progressive addition, because patient was used for that particular distance only for near. Now that he has, and he was also using moving the head towards sides and all those things. And I think the question was when he was using computer, he had the issue, sir, if I am correct.
Sorry?
No, the question was only when he uses the
He's
system.
a computer worker and he has been prescribed or dispensed with the progressive addition lenses
Yes, sir.
at the age of 50 years, whereas he must have been wearing bifocal earlier.
Okay, I think the problem is there all throughout. I thought the person is asking whether he has problems only while looking at the system. So now, when because the patient was, to answer this, the patient was actually, or the person was actually using bifocals previously and suddenly shifted to the progressive. He was using bifocals for a pretty long time, probably more than 10 years, if I assume. So then that case, patient already adapted to the situation with the bifocals to move the head or move the eyes like that, so to view there. But here, when they prescribe the progressive, suddenly that the restrictions which is on the side because of the astigmatism, probably all those things actually is coming into the way and patient is having discomfort. Or also look into the near addition which is prescribed, or is it a sudden jump from the previous prescription to this one. All these the factors to be considered addressing this patient's issue.
I totally agree with you. I believe in not rocking the boat. So if a person is used to wearing a bifocal for about 10 odd years, leave him with a bifocal. Don't try to push progressives onto him unless he wants to try it himself. So as far as possible, don't try to change things just because you want to oversell or over dispense your progressives. Aparna, these are the questions that I have for you right now. Thank you very much for a wonderful discussion and wonderful talk.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, all of you.
Apologize again for what happened yesterday. It wasn't under our control. Apologies for that. And we see you tomorrow, same time at 12 noon on the same channel. Tomorrow we have Mr. Ajay Shinde with his years of experience in dispensing, and he'll be talking to you how to dispense and troubleshoot with progressives and bifocals, etc. So see you tomorrow, same time, 12 noon. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.